you're watching a Screaming Fish here, people, and once again I'm here for you guys with yet another video, and this time, as you can tell by the clearly very obvious title under the screen, we are looking at Venom, which is a Marvel movie made by Sony about a Spider-Man villain, that being Venom, set in a universe where Spider-Man, get this, doesn't even exist. Sony. You know, you really are the best. That is the greatest idea I have ever heard. Let's make a movie about a Spider-Man character set in a universe where Spider-Man doesn't even exist. That is the greatest idea you could have possibly come up with. So, this is going to be a different sort of review, mainly because I'm going in with full-on spoilers, because there are things about this movie that I cannot talk about without spoiling the movie, so if you haven't seen this movie yet, I would recommend not watching this video, but considering this movie's surprising success, and the fact that it's been out for almost a month now, I'm guessing that most of you will have already seen it, so keep watching, I guess. Anyway, is Venom a good movie? Well, yes and no. I think this movie is really entertaining, and I had a lot of fun watching it. I don't think this movie is anywhere near as bad as some people made it out to be, but with that said, this movie is not flawless by any stretch. It has a ton of problems, but I would say it is a decent film. The best part of this movie is easily the dynamic between Eddie Brock and Venom. The chemistry between both characters is flawless, although that's not really too surprising considering they're both played by the same dude. It feels like the most unlikely duo you could think of, which is why it works so well, because these two are almost always arguing and disagreeing with each other, which leads to some pretty funny moments between the two characters. Venom actually has a personality, which makes it all the more entertaining when the two characters are bouncing off one another, and it's great to see that some actual thought was put into the writing of this character. Tom Hardy really does the best with what he has to work with here. He's definitely not bad in this, even if the character, the way he's written, and some of his mannerisms are a little inconsistent. Nevertheless, Tom Hardy is clearly having a lot of fun with this role, and he really gives it his all, so props to Tom Hardy. Also, his voice work for Venom is awesome. He sounds chilling and unsettling, but he also adds a comedic tone to the character that makes Venom feel like more than just a sadistic, psychotic alien that really likes Tom Hardy for some reason. The whole Venom effect, for the most part, is amazing, which is good, because, you know, that's the most important effect in the whole movie. The effects team completely nailed his movements, mannerisms, and particularly his facial expressions. It's actually pretty impressive that they managed to give this character believable and recognizable facial expressions without making it feel unnatural. Venom also looks incredibly intimidating, not just because he's, you know, freakishly big, but also because he is a ruthless killer that shows no mercy. A great example of this is when he's fighting a SWAT team inside this building. He's not just incapacitating them, he's throwing these guys all over the place, picking up dudes and slamming them into other dudes, and just utterly destroying them. It's a really entertaining scene that perfectly establishes that Venom isn't just another hero with a moral code, because, well, he doesn't have one. When Venom truly first appears, it is so amazing. I actually got goosebumps just from watching a couple of seconds of Tom Hardy transforming into Venom. It was... oh my god, it was so cool. The action, for the most part, is really good. Like I mentioned earlier, that building scene with the SWAT team is awesome, and the motorcycle chase is exhilarating and really well filmed. I've heard some people make Catwoman comparisons when they talk about the filmmaking in this movie, and yeah, some of it is pretty bad, particularly the editing in some cases. But the chunk of the movie where Eddie gets the symbiote all the way to the building fight scene was really well done, not just with the Eddie and Venom dynamic, but also because the action was really fun and creative. This movie doesn't take itself too seriously, but believe me, this movie knows it. It's like the movie is saying, yeah, we know, this is dumb, but who cares? Let's just go crazy with this thing. Those parts of the film are a joy to watch and add a fantastic sense of levity to the film. And now we're on to the bad. A lot of this movie is pretty bad, especially the beginning. The editing and pacing is ridiculously bad at points. It starts off way too slow, but at the same time it feels like they went through key events way too quickly. A lot of the character choices and moments where we're supposed to feel an emotional connection just feel rushed, but at the same time it's just uninteresting, which makes this part of the movie feel way too drawn out and just kinda boring. It results in a mesh of scenes that just go by way too quickly, but because they're so forgettable and uninteresting, they feel way too long. I didn't care for anything that was going on. The date night scene with Tom Hardy and Michelle Williams is unbearable, partly because these two actors have zero chemistry, which really derails the romance aspect of this movie, but also because it's just not interesting. and I found myself impatiently waiting for Venom to show up. Most of the scenes between these two characters are just compromised of moments that try to make you care for these characters, but because they're so poorly executed, they come off as cringeworthy. The scene where Michelle Williams' character becomes She-Venom and kisses Eddie is one of the most unintentionally hilarious movie scenes I have seen all year. I could not stop myself from sniggering. And speaking of Michelle Williams, she is surprisingly bad in this movie, considering she was so good in other movies like Manchester by the Sea or even The Greatest Showman. As for Riz Ahmed, yeah, he's fine. He does what he can with the material he's given to work with, but on the whole, his character just feels like a really cliche-driven corporate nutjob. As soon as I saw the scene where he's talking to those kids and motivating them to do the stuff he does, I immediately thought to myself, yeah, he's one of those villains. I will admit though, I do like the symbiote Riot, who does attach himself to Riz Ahmed in the same way Venom attaches himself to Eddie. That character is awesome and a really cool addition to the film, but I wanted to see way more of him because he's a cool character that's barely in this movie. He should have been the main villain, not freaking Riz Ahmed, because, well, here's the thing. He's just not intimidating, like, at all. Again, I can appreciate the fact that he is trying, but he never comes across as all that intimidating. He just feels like a guy who's trying to do a really bad impression of an actual bad guy. The final battle of this movie is not only generic, but it's just awful. It basically derives into another one of those hero fights a villain in a similar suit as their own scenes. There are a couple of cool moments like Riot ripping Venom off of Tom Hardy's face, as well as a couple of cool uses of the symbiotes like turning their limbs into tendrils or giant blades, but most of this fight scene is just a couple of balls of slime just bouncing and slithering all over the show, and it looks terrible. And the two move so quickly it's hard to even see what's going on. I also think that this movie definitely could have benefited from an R rating, mainly because there are some small moments that suffer from its low age rating, like some of the action feels a little tame, and also when it just cuts away when Venom bites someone's head off, for example. I'm not asking for Mortal Kombat levels of gore, but something just to make the action feel a little more real would have helped. That said, it definitely wouldn't have completely saved this movie because, let's face it, an R rating isn't going to fix bad editing and pacing because essentially all you'd be doing is adding a few extra drops of blood to the mix, which adds almost nothing to the story unless you find a way to make it matter. I know this is going to sound like a bit of a nitpick, but when it happened, it annoyed me unbelievably. So, the turd in the wind scene from the trailers is basically the end of the movie. It's the second to last shot. Yeah, it's a great scene, and I could watch it all day on a loop if I could, but why would you show the ending of your movie in your trailer, Sony? I mean, for crying out loud, have you learnt nothing? There's also a ton of stuff in this movie that just doesn't make sense, and I think that has something to do with the fact that 40 minutes of this film was left on the cutting room floor according to Tom Hardy himself. So just like Suicide Squad, Justice League, and Alien 3, it seems a vitally important chunk of the movie was cut out, and now the movie is suffering for it. For example, there's a scene where Venom survives an explosion that should have killed him with no explanation, despite it being mentioned earlier in the movie that one of the greatest weaknesses of the symbiotes is fire and sound, both of which, in case you didn't know, come with explosions. We also have times where the characters are freaking out because they're seeing things that they never would have imagined existed, and then in the next scene they're all of a sudden used to seeing aliens and superheroes. Not to mention scenes where Riz Ahmed's character all of a sudden goes from wanting to save the world with the symbiotes to wanting to destroy it with the symbiotes as soon as he meets Riot, because that would totally be treated like a split-second decision in real life! Like every movie universe, this movie has rules that it has to follow, but that's the problem. It's not clearly defined. Like how the symbiote can sometimes read Eddie's mind and know what he's thinking, and then sometimes it can't, or how it can see people coming to knock on the door before they can even knock, and then not be able to see a car driving right next to it. The symbiote can seem to make Eddie do whatever it wants, but for some reason it still needs his cooperation, so I guess it just likes having him around. Basically, these are questions that I'm having to figure out on my own, and that shouldn't be the case. A movie like this should have me questioning where the sequel will go and what will happen to the main character in the next movie. Not wondering how the hell the symbiote's powers work, which should have been established, but they just didn't do a good job at that. In the scenes where Venom is fighting Riot, Riot turns his hands into giant blades and even has spikes coming out of every part of his body, and Venom just basically says that he can't do the things that Riot can. But why? They never really elaborate on that. Is Riot just more genetically evolved than Venom, or just more powerful? They never really explain it. So, no, Venom is not a great movie. However, it is still really entertaining despite having a lot of really dull and boring moments. There's some cool action, there's some great effects, the dynamic between Eddie and Venom is awesome, but I just wish all that great stuff was in a legit great movie and not just one that's kinda meh. With that said, Venom gets a 5 out of 10. So, guys, those are my thoughts on Venom. I do hope you enjoyed this video. I know how these parts of the videos usually work, but I really have to say this. And Sony, I know you're not watching this video, but I'm going to say it anyway because it needs to be said, even if it's been said a million times already. You really need to stop showing so much in your trailers, because here's the thing. It ruins the whole movie for everyone. The last trailer you showed for Venom basically ran through the entire story, including the ending. What was your game plan there? You basically ruined your movie for your audience. And that's probably going to affect its critical rating, because people basically know what's going to happen, so they're probably not going to be as interested as they could have been if they didn't know that the turn in the wind scene, for example, was the ending of the freaking movie. So I ask again, what was your game plan here? But anyway, back on track. What did you guys think of the movie? Did you think it was good? Did you think it was bad? Did you think it was somewhere in the middle? Please leave your thoughts down in the comments below, and also please don't forget to follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And once again, I'll see you guys in the next one. Goodbye, guys.